Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how a tough childhood can shape a person's whole life and especially their mental well-being? Well, this new study dives deep into that very question, looking at young people who have lived in residential care facilities. This research uses a really interesting method to understand how the experiences of young people in residential care have shaped their lives, focusing on their mental health and well-being over time. The core idea is that we can't just look at someone's problems in isolation. We need to understand their whole story, their whole life journey, and how they've interacted with their environment. So what is the big picture here? These researchers looked at how person-environment interactions shape the start and the continuation of psychological suffering and recovery. Basically, how does who we are and where we are combine to create our mental health ups and downs? They use the method called Lifelines, which is exactly what it sounds like, drawing a line that represents your life. Think of it like this. You draw a line across a page that goes from birth all the way to today. Then you draw that line up and down based on how well you felt at different points. Highs are good times, low points are tough times. And the tricky part is that each person's line, even if it is about similar struggles, looks totally unique. They talked to 7 young people who have lived or are currently living in residential care. These weren't just short chats. These interviews lasted about 97 minutes on average. Imagine drawing your whole life and talking about it for nearly 2 hours. It is a lot. But the goal was to get a super detailed understanding of their experiences, their feelings, and the world around them. The young people were between 15 and 22 years old and had a history of living in foster or group homes. Many of them had been in multiple placements. They also had a lot of challenges in their lives, things like family tensions, neglect, abuse, and parental mental health issues. It is clear these weren't easy beginnings. Now, what did these lifelines actually show? The overall picture was pretty stark. Most of the young people had lines that spent more time below the neutral line, meaning they experienced the vast majority of their lives as hardship. It's like they were navigating a constant uphill battle, and the problems often worsened over time. Think about Robin's story, for example. His mild eating problems and suicidal thoughts at 12 years old became severe eating disorders, suicide attempts, and dissociation by the time he was 17 or 18. It's a powerful visual of how struggles can deepen if not addressed. But it wasn't just a straight downhill slide for everyone. The researchers identified different patterns in the lines. One pattern they called fluctuating. These were like roller coasters, periods of intense ups and downs. These periods often signaled instability or crisis, but here is the really interesting part: they often marked the start of a recovery. It's like things had to get really turbulent before they could start getting better. These jolts often happened when there were destabilizing forces like moving a lot, going through trauma therapy, or having conflicts with others. Robin described one period as a year of constant crisis where small triggers had huge effects. It made him feel like he was a problem, and this intense instability was followed by a period of him trying to find his way back up. Then there were the change patterns. These are when the line moves from one level to another. They found stepwise changes like climbing stairs, abrupt shifts like a sudden drop or jump, and gradual changes like a smooth slope. Downward stepwise changes often happened when there was a cascade of stressful events. Think of divorce, a parent's illness, child abuse, all happening close together. It was like a series of blows that pushed their well-being down. On the flip side, upward stepwise changes were linked to things that gave them a sense of control and goodness. Things like getting therapy, a good relationship with a caregiver, finding inner peace, gaining more independence, moving to a new school or home that was more supportive. Robin's story again is a good example. A big downward spiral for him took only about 5 weeks, but his recovery took about 2 years. This really highlights that going down can be fast, but climbing back up takes a whole lot longer. Abrupt shifts were like sudden cliffhanger moments. These were sharp, steep lines that happened really fast, usually triggered by a single extreme event. For some, it was a breakup, the death of a loved one, or even an out-of-home placement that felt sudden and scary. For Ashley and Louisa, a rape triggered a drastic downward shift. But sometimes these abrupt shifts could even be upward, like for Mohammed, who felt things improved when he finally got away from a difficult home situation. However, the researchers noted that these quick upward jolts often didn't last. The line would quickly drop again. It wasn't the same as a slow, steady recovery. It was more like a temporary high that quickly faded. And then there's gradual change. This is where the line smoothly slopes up or down. Over a longer period, downward gradual changes often happened with ongoing chronic stressors at home or school that slowly wore them down. Think of a constant low level of neglect or bullying. It was like a slow erosion of well-being. But upward gradual changes were really important. They represented a slow recovery process after those extreme negative events. While the bad stuff might have happened in days, the recovery took months. Ashley described building a supportive relationship as helping her line go up slowly. It shows that true recovery often happens at a crawl, not a sprint. So what can we learn from all of this? The biggest takeaway is that we need to move away from just looking at diagnoses and symptoms. This study strongly argues for an interaction-based approach. We need to understand a person's psychological suffering in the light of their entire life history and their developmental context. The researchers emphasize that context is not just a backdrop, it is an active player. The environment, the relationships, the challenges all actively shape mental health. So instead of just trying to fix the individual, we need to think about fixing the circumstances that contribute to their struggles. This means things like reducing poverty and creating more stable, supportive living environments. When a young person is stuck in a negative pattern, interventions should aim to shake things up a bit, but for recovery professionals need to create stable, supportive conditions. This means things like consistent housing, good relationships, a strong connection with caregivers, and giving young people more control over their own lives. And importantly, recovery takes time. Systems are hard to reverse, so patience is key for both the young person and the professional supporting them. Ultimately, this study shows that lifelines are a really powerful way to map out these complex human journeys. They reveal that psychological suffering and recovery are not simple linear processes. They're messy, nonlinear, and deeply shaped by the unique interplay between a person and their world. This research is strong because it uses the actual stories and drawings of young people to understand complex patterns. It acknowledges that these are subjective experiences, but argues that these subjective experiences are incredibly important. They're not just an objective history, but a story the person tells about themselves. I think this research is fascinating because it gives us a new lens through which to view mental health struggles, especially for those who have had a really difficult start in life. It's so easy to label someone with a disorder and forget all the events and the environment that led them there. This study reminds us that the whole story matters. The idea of attractors that the researchers mention, where people can get stuck in negative patterns, is really insightful. It explains why recovery can be so hard and why it takes so much effort to move to a more positive state. For me, the most impactful part is the contrast between how quickly problems can worsen and how slowly recovery happens. It's a call for more patience and understanding in how we approach mental health care. The limitations include the small sample size, which is typical for in-depth qualitative research, but means we can't generalize to everyone. Also, the researchers' presence might have influenced the Lifelines participants drew, but the researchers were very open about their own influence. Future research could explore these lifelines with even larger and more diverse groups. It would also be interesting to see if technology could help track these lifelines in real time, not just retrospectively. Imagine an app that helps young people map their well-being and identify patterns as they happen. So what is the big takeaway? If you or someone you know has struggled with their mental health, remember that your story matters. Your context matters, and recovery is possible even though it might be a long and bumpy road. Thanks for tuning into RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more insights into the world of psychology, and let us know in the comments what you think about these findings. See you next time.